If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine. And maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them. From disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Hello, word nerds. Welcome to the ad for my podcast called The Dictionary. My name is Spencer Parks. I host this podcast. I read the dictionary, the words, the definitions, etymologies, even more. I talk about it. I try to explain things. I also sometimes try to put in some silly jokes or silly sing-songy things. You know, it's just a fun way to read the dictionary. Sometimes I have guests on, and I hope that you will turn on this podcast, check it out, start from the beginning, and, enjoy this, what I like to call edutainment. Check it out in all the places that you can find podcasts.
Hello and welcome to How Did This Not Get Made?
This is the podcast all about the movies you never saw, the scripts that were never filmed, and the ideas that never even made it to the page. My name is David Spencer.
And my name is Daniel Kaka.
So we are back.
Yes.
To continue the season.
Yeah, we are at a little bit of a slowdown, but I am glad to still be doing episodes. I have been researching constantly, even with the job change and whatnot. And I'm very excited about what the subject is going to be for this one.
Yeah, what are we talking about?
We are talking about the creature from the Black Lagoon.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to be talking more specifically about the John Carpenter creature from the Black Lagoon, but we are going to touch on some other creature features that may or may not have happened throughout the years that followed after it, and even a project that happened before then that didn't fully come through.
Very cool, very cool.
But before we do that, I just want to ask you, what is your history with the creature, with Gil-Man?
I can't say that I've got a lot of familiarity with Creature from the Black Lagoon. I've seen, a couple of the Universal monster films from that era. I've always been aware of Creature for the Black Lagoon. I watched that original one for the first time in preparation for this, and I can't really say that it left any impression on me. It was just like, yep, that was a thing. I don't know. It didn't really stick with me. I don't really know much about the lore or about, the potential for this, but it really just feels like the Creature for the Black Lagoon is just there to fill out the roster. Maybe people will disagree with me, but just from how I felt about watching the movie and just kind of how I felt about hearing about the creature in general, it's just like having another monster for having the sake of another monster.
Yeah, and I think your perspective may change when we go through the history of it,
Okay.
because he's a pretty interesting character, a pretty interesting monster for sure.
Cool.
I know with my history, I think very much like you, like I recently watched The Creature from the Black Lagoon for the first time, but it's been something that's always been in the zeitgeist. I know both of us have been to Universal. You worked at Universal for a little bit.
For a little bit, yeah.
Just the classic Universal monsters were always present, were always there. There was Frankenstein, Dracula, the Mummy, Invisible Man, Hunchback of Notre Dame, and the Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Mm-hmm.
They were just, like I said, just part of the roster. That was just always there. I know Karina Longworth, she did a really interesting series about Carl Laemmle and how he got the monster films into Universal and how he got all that started, and how Universal kind of became the staple of horror films, or at least the studio that became known for horror films.
Yeah.
And for the creature, he's just one of the few that are part of the lineup. But the movie, I can understand why it didn't seem like it had too much of an effect, because this is, again, one of those movies where, because they did it first, there are so many other films, TV shows that followed up with it and kind of took the idea and then ran with it, which is kind of why it seems like it doesn't seem like anything fresh or anything new when it comes to that. But I know we've seen this plenty of times. With the first one, it's like they walked so that so many other monster movies could run.
Sure.
Yeah, let's go into the history of the creature from the Black Lagoon. But before we go into that history, let's go into the lagoon of these.
The terrifying Black Lagoon of advertising.
Yes.
If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine, and maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them, from disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
And we're back. Let's get into this lore. So, The Creature from the Black Lagoon, it premiered in theaters on February 12th, 1954. Although the film was in black and white, while the rest of Hollywood was mostly in Technicolor at this time, it was presented in 3D, which was pretty new technology. The film presents itself as a movie from both the past and the future, kind of making it timeless in a way. This film introduced the world to the creature, later nicknamed Gil-Man. The part man, part fish creature came at the tail end of the Universal Carl Laemmle classic monsters era. That era was actually between 1931 and 1956. So this was at the time that they were kind of declining into these cheap B-movie sequels.
Yeah.
They had a lot of forgettable add-on characters. There were crossovers and multiple run-ins with Abbott and Costello. So it's a miracle that this amphibious creature really stood out amongst the muck. The idea of the creature came about at the height of the monster era in 1941 when producer William Allen was attending a 1941 production dinner party during the filming of Citizen Kane. Now, William Allen, he was actually an actor in Citizen Kane. He portrayed the reporter Jerry Thompson. Now, in a conversation with Mexican cinematographer Gabriel Figueroa, he told Allen about a mythical creature that lived in the Amazon River that was half fish, half human, and no, it was not a mermaid. About 10 years later, Allen pursued the idea to make it into a film. With Maurice Zim, they created a treatment titled The Sea Monster. Now, it doesn't make much sense just because he does come from a river, but that's why rewrites are necessary. They modeled the story to structure after Beauty and the Beast. A proper script was then written by Harry Essex, who also wrote Man-Made Monster and It Came from Outer Space. The other writer was Arthur Ross, and they retitled it The Black Lagoon. Now, to direct, Allen hired Jack Arnold. He also directed It Came from Outer Space, but he also directed Tarantula and The Incredible Shrinking Man. So this guy was known for his special effects, known for his horror films as well. And he was coming off of the success of his latest film, House of Wax, which came out in 1953. Because House of Wax was in 3D, Allen wanted his film about a hybrid fish creature to be in that same format. The Gil-Man suit was designed by Disney animator Millicent Patrick. For nearly 50 years, the creature design was primarily credited to the makeup artist Bud Westmore, who left out her role in the production, and Westmore was primarily in charge of just making the molds and not actually the design. To make the bodysuit was makeup artist Jack Kevin. Now, he also worked on Wizard of Oz, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, It Came from Outer Space, and Abbott and Costello Meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. While the head was sculpted by Chris Mueller Jr., who worked on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and Jaws 2. The men under the suit were Ben Chapman and Rico Browning. Ben Chapman did all the scenes with the creature on land, primarily shot on the Universal Studios backlot. Like every creature suit that we've covered on the show, the suit was incredibly hot to wear. Chapman would often request to be hosed down to keep cool. Because the suit was form-fitted to the stunt actors, they couldn't actually afford to lose or gain any weight during the production, or the suit wouldn't fit anymore. And for Chapman, he couldn't sit down while wearing the suit. The headpiece caused a lot more issues because Chapman couldn't see out of it, and in one take he actually scraped Julie Adams' head against the wall while he was carrying her through the grotto.
I was carrying Julie in my arms through this cave, and she was, slung over my arms with her head down. And I couldn't see where I was going, and clunk, I went wide into one of these artificial rocks. And I had no idea what happened. She started kicking, and they were yelling, "Cut!"
I can't say I was truly injured, but it gave me a bit of a start. First of all, I'm freezing cold, trying not to have goosebumps, and then the bump.
There's a famous picture that appeared in the newspaper of Dick Carlson, Dick Stanning, myself, Jack Arnold, and a nurse patching her up. We took a couple of hours off, and Julie was ready to go again. Put a little makeup on it, but she was a very professional lady.
Now, Rico Browning was in the suit for all of the underwater scenes. Now, while filming, Browning could hold his breath for about 2 to 4 minutes, depending on how much movement the scene called for. Browning was first brought onto the production actually as a location scout. Prior to that, he was working on filming newsreels and specialized in capturing footage underwater. He primarily worked in Florida and suggested that they filmed at a lake in Wakulla Springs. While scouting, the camera crew did underwater screen tests and had Browning swim in front of the camera. A few days later, he was asked if he could portray the Gil-Man, which he accepted, and he continued to portray the Gil-Man in the next 2 sequels that followed it. Browning then went on to establish a career in the film industry, working as a second unit director and a stunt coordinator, working for such films as Flipper, Thunderball, Around the World Under the Sea, Caddyshack, Raise the Titanic, Never Say Never Again, and Police Academy 5, just to name a few movies.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a long and prolific career.
He's got a really interesting career.
Yeah.
But it's very much like how he's the director for John Wick. He started off as a stuntman and then went on to be a second unit director for like doing stunts and then went on to actually like direct his own movies. And that was John Wick. Chad Stahelski. That's who he is. So, with the box office success from Creature from the Black Lagoon, it seemed like Universal's creature features weren't losing their luster. So, the sequel went into production under the title Return of the Creature, which was then reworked into Return of the Creature from the Black Lagoon, which they then settled on Revenge of the Creature. That one came out in 1955. Although it is implied that the creature was shot to death at the end of the first film, the creature then returned, explained away by not explaining it at all. The filming location was entirely in Florida, although the location of the Amazon Lagoon changed to the St. Johns River, and the primary location was at the Maryland of Florida, which was the setting of the generically and redundantly named Ocean Harbor Oceanarium. This film was also the acting debut of a 25-year-old Clint Eastwood.
Oh.
Yeah, he portrays an uncredited lab assistant who has a rat in his pocket.
Wow.
Doc, but there were 4 rats in there when I changed my lights. Now there's only 3. It's my considered opinion that rat number 4 is sitting inside that cat.
Are you sure you fed them all this morning?
Sure, I always feed them. How'd you get in here?
Returning to direct was Jack Arnold, with the film being shot again in black and white 3D. To write the script, they hired Martin Berkeley, who previously wrote another Jack Arnold film, Tarantula. Like I mentioned before, Rico Browning returned as the Gil-Man for any underwater shots, but the above water shots was replaced with the actor Tom Hennessy. This film more so follows the similar plotline of King Kong, in which the Gil-Man is literally a fish out of water who is taken to a lab to be studied, taught how to communicate with humans, and used as a tourist attraction. In the end, the creature is shot again and actually inserted the same shot of the Gil-Man like falling lifelessly through the water. So they reused the same shot of him dying from the first film to show him dying again in the second film. Yeah. But then there was another film. There was The Creature Walks Among Us. This one came out in 1956. Now, Jack Arnold did not return for this third installment, and instead, John Sherwood was hired, and the movie was shot in 2D. Returning was Rico Browning to do what he does best, swim underwater for long periods of time. And one of the writers from the first film, Arthur Ross, they used his treatment to create this movie. That treatment that he created was called The Creature of Man. Now, the above-water Gil-Man was replaced again. This time, the actor was Don McGowan. This is the film where the theme and premise really goes off the rails. In this, Dr. William Barton sets out to find the Gil-Man, which I guess he's still alive, and they turn the creature into a landwalker. Now, why would they do this? It was to discover how humans can evolve so that they may live in outer space. On top of that, the monster is completely changed after he's given surgery. The scales are replaced with skin, which give the head and face a much smoother appearance and is monstrously bigger. He also wears clothes now because it's cheaper than making a new suit.
Yeah.
This film wouldn't just be the end of the Gil-Man's run, but the end of the monster era for Universal in 1956. And like many of the other Universal monsters, Gil-Man had a run-in with Abbott and Costello.
Well, they tell us that this is where they make all the horror pictures.
Oh, yes, you're Abbott and Costello, aren't you? Yes. Yes, they told me you were coming down into the prop room. This is where we keep all of our horror figures for the horror pictures.
So they told us.
Yes, there's Dracula, and there's the Wolfman, and there's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But wait until you see our latest horror creature.
Who is that?
The creature from the Black Lagoon.
That one actually premiered on TV 9 days after the very first Creature from the Black Lagoon hit theaters. So they were already on top of it. Even though the creature was around for just 3 years, Gil-Man has become such an iconic character and is considered one of the essential monsters of the Universal's classic monster lineup. What's even more incredible is that most of the monsters are taken from other properties and established characters. So like Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, Phantom of the Opera, Wolfman. The Gil-Man, on the other hand, is a completely original creature made specifically for a Universal film, which means that Universal, they own the rights to this character, which is why a lot of other studios, they can use like Dracula and whatnot. But as far as the Gil-Man goes, like they have to ask permission from Universal in order for them to use that character. Now, attempts to bring back Gil-Man have been numerous. The first notable attempt was with John Landis in 1982 with a script written by Nigel Neely. At the time, he was best known for directing Schlock, Animal House, The Blues Brothers, and American Werewolf in London. Originally, Landis was going to step back and bring in Jack Arnold, who was 65 at the time, to direct this reboot. In the script, there would have been two creatures, one destructive and the other calm and sensitive, and they would have to face off against the U.S. Navy. Landis also wanted to shoot the movie in 3D like the original, but the executives at Universal chose to invest instead into another 3D movie at the time, Jaws 3D. So that film never went through. But in 1987, we did see the Gil-Man on the silver screen with the Fred Dekker film Monster Squad. Now, this creature was designed by Sam Winston, who changed the design enough to actually skirt around the copyright infringement, but it was recognizable enough to know what creature we are looking at. I would suggest looking up to see what this creature looks like. Now, this creature he created is honestly terrifying. It has a piranha angular fish head with a scaly human body with fins.
Oh, yeah.
Unlike the first Gil-Man, when he gets shot, he actually stays dead. Although it is great to see the Gil-Man once again in a film, although he was not the star of the film and he was not affiliated with the Universal creation.
Yeah.
The next attempt and the primary topic of this episode is when John Carpenter threw his hat into the ring to reboot The Creature from the Black Lagoon in 1992.
Yeah.
Universal's then president Tom Pollock told Carpenter, quote, "Look through our library of pictures and see if there's anything you want to make." The first movie John Carpenter would think of to reboot was The Creature from the Black Lagoon. Carpenter seemed like a great fit to remake this creature feature since he's done this before when he made The Thing back in 1982, which was actually a remake of The Thing from Another World, which was made in 1951, which was based on the book of the same name.
Yeah, that's definitely what I was thinking of when I was thinking of like, oh yeah, John Carpenter doing Creature from the Black Lagoon makes sense.
Yeah. Now, to create the story, Carpenter first read Nigel Neely's script that he wrote for John Landis. Now, this is a quote from Carpenter. Nigel wrote a very interesting script, but it was written for 3D. It was also written 10 years ago, and things have changed since then. We're going to start from the beginning. We may use aspects of Nigel's work. He wrote some pretty neat scenes, but we're going to redo them. Carpenter wasn't willing to work with Neely again after collaborating with him prior on Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. Carpenter described him as irascible and mean. To write the script instead, Carpenter hired Bill Phillips, who would later work with Carpenter to make Christine, Firestarter, and El Diablo. Now, Carpenter's hope was to make an R-rated modern-day reboot. From the 1992 Starlog magazine interview, in which Carpenter explains what the film would be about, quote, "There were several possible aspects to the storyline. One of them involves the creature being the missing link between man and fish. It would be interesting to combine that with a creationist scientist who is trying to prove that man walked with dinosaurs 10,000 years ago. They tried to prove that literal biblical origin of life in a total contradiction of scientific fact."
I think this is one of the interesting things about the original movie, that it's talking about evolution and the evolutionary link and everything of fish being able to evolve to grow legs and walk on land and everything. It's kind of cool that this is like wanting to lean into that even more.
Yeah. You get that opening shot. It's like that explosion shot, which is supposed to be like the Big Bang.
Yeah.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void.
It's a little strange that the origins of all of the other Universal monsters, or at least as far as I know, are much more mystical and mythical monsters, as opposed to this is like very much tied to like science and evolution and that type of a thing.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about when a lot of these monsters were created, they're kind of a product of their time.
Sure.
And with the Gil-Man, like, the evolutionary theory was starting to become more and more popular, more and more recognized, and it was being taught in schools. So why not lean into it and be like, what if from there you could create a creature from that? So like, I know with Dracula and vampires, that came out of the fact that a lot of people were going into comas. A lot of people didn't recognize it, so a lot of people were getting buried alive.
Yeah.
And then the idea of like, what if they came to life from there? What would they act like? What would they need? And stuff like that. And
I'm thinking about Frankenstein is definitely more of a science fiction than a mystical thing.
Yeah. So it makes sense that we would kind of create a Gil-Man out of what we know at that time. Continuing on from that Starlog magazine interview, from John Carpenter again, I would also love to work in a little Lovecraftian feel. I'm thinking of the shadow over Innsmouth, fish mating with humans. There has been a legend about a fishman, so perhaps there was a race of them living in the Amazon. Supposedly, there are hidden pyramids in the Amazon. I want to try to get that in there. To create the Gil-Man, Carpenter wanted to get the legendary special effects artist Rick Baker to create the creature. Coincidentally, Baker revealed that he actually signed on to make the creature a decade earlier when John Landis was leading the project. From Carpenter explaining the design of the creature, quote, "I don't want to make him unrecognizable. I want the creature from the Black Lagoon. However, I think he could look less rubbery. His claws don't have to bounce like they did in the original film. But essentially, he's not really broken. So why fix him?" And then from Rick Baker, "We actually did a whole bunch of designs and maquettes. My designs for the creature were kind of like my designs for the Wolfman. It was very much based on a love for the original material and trying to stay true to that in a lot of ways. I think we had a creature that was updated, but you still could tell where it came from." You can actually look up Rick Baker, Creature from the Black Lagoon, and you can see the full design. Like, he actually made a full costume of the creature. You can tell, like, it does stay faithful, but it does, like, it kind of, like, trims, like, the rubberiness for it, for the original suit, and, like, really, like, hones it in and makes it look a bit more terrifying. Yeah. Like, you can see, like, the eyes aren't like that weird goggle eyes. They've, like, narrowed in.
Yeah.
So then that leads us to the plot of John Carpenter's script would have been like. And this is what we're going to go into right now.
All right.
But before we do so, we are going to get into the plot of these advertisers. And we're back, and let's get into the story of John Carpenter's The Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yes.
We open on a wide shot of Earth. My guess is that this was actually the Earth using the Universal logo animation, and we push in onto South America, Brazil, 1988. We are somewhere on the Amazon River following a small plane flying over the body of water. Inside is the pilot, Richard Conroy. He's 38 years old, American, and a cartographer, Pete Hazard. He's a 46-year-old Australian.
Pete Hazard. Interesting name.
Put a pin in that name, yeah. The thunderstorm they're flying through continues to get worse. The engine stalls and Richard attempts to restart the plane, but no luck. They crash land into a lagoon. The rain stops suddenly. Pete grabs his camera and starts snapping pictures of the wildlife. Pete is caught off guard when he finds a pyramid-shaped stone with hieroglyphics sticking out of the water. They take an inflatable raft onto the water and inspect it further. The stone seems to be the top of a temple. Richard explores further and peers through the opening of the top of the temple when suddenly a scaly, webbed hand bursts out of the water, grabs his face, and pulls him under. Pete paddles away to the plane and tries to call out a distress call on the radio, but before he can send out his coordinates, a large shadow casts over him. We cut to black. 5 years later. A research facility has occupied the Black Lagoon area, centering around the high-tech research vessel known as El Diablo II. The Long Island MD, Jake Heyman, seems to be leading the expedition with his team, Abel Gonzalez, who is a ichthyologist, Jean-Claude Gaston, Adolfo Palminteri, Bobby Whitaker, Hector Ramirez, who is a botanist, and Mary Pearson, who is a chemist. Bobby has found the plane wreck covered in foliage. Further inspection reveals that something more than a plane crash happened here. Abel is anxious to jump into the water to inspect the temple, but Jake states that they should do this right and get an archaeologist first. At night, the team inspects their newly developed photos. Hector says that the underground temple looks like an Incan pyramid. What's strange is that the structure looks like it was made to be underwater. They are in need of an archaeologist, but it would take about a week until they get one on site. The team also takes in a wanderer, Siri Thompson, who shares her story about how she was kicked out of Greenpeace for allegedly spiking trees so they would stop them from getting chopped down. Do you know what spiking trees are?
No.
This is a very deadly activist move to avoid trees from getting cut down. And the way that it would work is that you would actually plant metal spikes into a tree so that if you start chopping it down and you hit that metal spike, chances are that metal spike is going to shoot out of the tree, which could potentially kill someone for trying to chop down that tree. She says that she didn't actually spike the trees. She just put up signs that say, hey, don't chop down these trees. They got spikes in them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, she allegedly got kicked out of Greenpeace for spiking trees. She's trying to prove her worth to the team, which they all agree that she can stay, but they need to run it by Mary. Abel goes to the lab to find Mary, who is constantly chewing gum. She's buried in her work, studying algae, and acts like she cannot be bothered. She says Siri can stay. Later that night, Jake goes to Siri's sleeping quarters to talk. He's obviously interested in her. Abel interrupts their conversation, and the two leave, and Jake formally welcomes her to El Dorado too. That night, Siri is unable to sleep and leaves her cabin. She peers into the lagoon and sees something swimming by the temple. Jake approaches unexpectedly and tries to seduce Siri again, but she rejects all of his advances. We see the eyes of the creature underwater, and he's watching them. Abel interrupts Jake again, stating that he would like to go into the water to inspect the temple. Adolfo enters the picture, and Jake leaves defeated. A thunderstorm begins, and rain begins to pour. The next day, Abel, Hector, and Adolfo set up video cameras. Bobby and Jean-Claude rig hydrophones onto Bobby for when he dives into the water. Mary gets test tubes ready to be lowered into the water, and Siri notices a carving on the bow of the research vessel. Mary tells her it's a carranca that Hector brought. It's supposed to ward off evil spirits. Now, Siri goes to help Jean-Claude with the hydrophones. Jean-Claude finishes his cigarette and flicks the butt into the water. Siri fishes the cigarette out of the water and pockets the litter. I don't know if you remember from the first movie, there was like one specific shot. I believe it was Kay who was smoking on the boat, and she flicks a cigarette into the water, which at the time was like not really a big deal. But like nowadays, now that we're conscious of like littering, especially with like the Crying Indian commercial that came out, it's like, yeah, don't litter anymore. So like that was kind of a jab at that. Just be like, hey, don't litter the thing that we're studying, or like just don't litter at all.
Yeah.
Bobby and Abel dive into the water with the equipment. The others watch the monitor above the surface. Underwater, they spot a pink dolphin and a piranha before reaching the side of the temple. They find more Incan writing and hieroglyphics of jaguars and fertility signs, and a warning that translates to danger. Bobby and Abel resurface, but as soon as they reach the top, Abel dives right back into the temple. In the temple, Abel spots a strange, ancient scrawling. Old stone furniture, altars, and a goblet, which he takes. Just before he reaches the top of the surface, a large shadow casts over him. Luckily, it's just a big fish swimming above him. More shadows cast over Abel, implying that he's being followed by something. He reaches the surface and hands the goblet to the others. He wants to go back in, but the others refuse for him to go back because it might be too dangerous. The team properly set up to go into the temple this time and position the research vessel closer to the tip of the pyramid. The team takes off the top of the pyramid entirely for easy access. The team theorizes that the temple may have been built during a dry period before it was flooded, but Hector brings up folktales that he's heard about underwater citizens. Now Hector, he grew up in a tribe south of where their research location is before he got his PhD at Harvard. The team prepares for another dive. This time, it's Abel, Jean-Claude, and Siri going underwater. In the temple, they find a primitive wall painting of a fish-like creature. Siri snaps a photo of it with Abel posing in front of it like it's a tourist attraction. On the surface, the team hears a scream. Down below, Siri and Abel notice that Jean-Claude is missing. Siri and Abel resurface. Abel hands off his equipment and dives back down to search for Jean-Claude. Abel shines a light on the floor to find scattered bones everywhere. He unknowingly swims past an altar. Siri swims behind Abel to help find Jean-Claude, and in the shadows, we catch a glimpse of the creature's eyes, watching them. The creature seems to admire her. Abel and Siri enter a sealed chamber in the temple that doesn't seem to have any water in it, so it's like airlocked. They yell for Jean-Claude, but there's no signs of him. The creature watches them. Abel and Siri resurface, and the whole research team reviews the footage Jean-Claude shot to see if there was any clues of where he went. They watch the footage up until the scream, and the footage cuts out. They didn't figure out anything. We then cut to a government building in Sao Paulo, Brazil, where we find Pete Hazard, again, the Australian cartographer from the plane crash in the cold open. He's now 51 with a scar that starts at his mouth, continues down his neck, onto his chest, disappearing under his shirt. He receives a phone call from Hector about the location of the temple. Hazard seems to take this personally. He tells Hector to have the team wait and do nothing until he gets there, and that he will not be calling a search team until he's certain that this is what he is looking for. Without hesitation, he leaves, limping as he moves away quickly. Back at the lagoon, disobeying Hazard's demands, Siri, Bobby, and Abel dive into the temple and continue to search for Jean-Claude. The three find themselves into a trapezoidal chamber in waist-deep water. Bobby leads the team down the hallway on the left, but Siri diverges without telling them and goes down the hallway on the right. As she enters into the new chamber, a dark figure seems to be following her. For the first time, we see the full figure of the creature. This is actually a quote from the script because there's like a whole paragraph just describing the creature alone, just so that we have an idea. I know that can see the pictures on it online, but this is interesting, like how Rick Baker interpreted this.
Yeah.
Half man, half fish. He's huge, powerful. This body is plated, covered with scales, yet his skin is almost translucent. Areas of green broken up with molted colors, silvery around his gills. His hands and feet are webbed, with huge claws with each digit. In his face, a fish mouth, and inside, razor-sharp rows of teeth used to rend and tear flesh. In his eyes, alive, not simply blank fish eyes, but more human, glowing with cunning, emotion, intelligence. Yeah.
Definitely evocative.
Yeah. Now, the creature circles around Siri unnoticed as she swims through the chambers. The creature reaches out and touches her ankle. She freaks out, looks underwater to see what touched her. Just nothing. She keeps swimming and luckily runs into Abel and Bobby again, and they all resubmerge. Now, obviously, this is supposed to be a parallel from the first movie where you see Kay swimming through the water, and there's the Gil-Man just like infatuated with her and just like almost touching her leg and then going away, and then like really touching her leg and then like swimming away from there. Meanwhile, Pete Hazard pushes the limits of a rickety motorboat as he speeds down the Rio Negro while the Rolling Stones' Sympathy for the Devil is playing. Hazard is no longer dressed as a bureaucrat. He sports a cowboy hat and boots while smoking a hash pipe. In the cabin of his boat, we see the supplies of explosives, a pistol and rifle with plenty of ammo, scuba gear, a harpoon gun, beer, and potato chips. He randomly shoots at any wildlife to scare them away. Pete arrives to the research site, music still blaring, distracting Mary from her work. He rudely introduces himself as the Department of In-Fucking-Terrier Amazonian Territories.
Okay.
Yeah. The other scientists are in the temple still looking for Jean-Claude when Pete arrives. In the chamber, the team find bones, specifically from Richard Conroy, the pilot from the Cold Open. Hector tells the team the belief of his people hold that if you die in the water, you belong to the water. The team brings the bones of Richard Conroy to the surface, which is when they meet Pete Hazard. Pete warns them that if they try to get their friend back, they will pay with their lives. Pete shows them the majority of a scar, warning them that the creature could easily rip their flesh from their bones. He too was trying to rescue his friend. Pete is angry at what happened to him and tosses a live grenade at the pyramid, which detonates 30 feet short of the entrance. The others try to calm Pete down. Pete explains that for 5 years, he's been waiting to get his revenge, and now he finally gets that chance. The team humors Pete and makes him the leader of the expedition under the condition that he can't use explosives because they want to preserve the ancient temple. They say that they can't go in just yet because they've already been down there for a long time and they want to avoid the bends. So Pete waits on his boat until the team is ready. Now when Pete is gone, Abel tells Adolfo to call Barcelos immediately so that they can get rid of Pete. Adolfo tries to signal anyone on the radio, but there's no luck. The team meets in Bobby's cabin. Adolfo informs the team that someone has sabotaged the communication equipment. They conjure up a plan to at least get rid of Pete's explosives when they do the dive tomorrow. Now, the next day, Abel, Jake, Bobby, Siri, Hector, Adolfo, and Pete are all searching the temple. Pete is the only one with a harpoon gun. Mary looks into Pete's boat to see that there is a rifle rigged to shoot anyone that enters his boat. So she just walks away. He still has his explosives. Abel, Bobby, and Jake find a new section of the temple they haven't searched yet, the crypt. The chamber is narrow and long with a low ceiling, bones scattered on the floor in the stone beds. Jake finds a corpse with flesh still attached. It's Jean-Claude. There are slash marks across his face, neck, and chest, similar to Pete's scars, but deeper. Jean-Claude's flesh is waterlogged, and his arm has been ripped off. Jake takes the body and swims it out of the crypt. Bobby finds his arm with the flashlight still in hand, and he takes that back too. They bring the body into an airlock chamber, and the others meet them there, and they witness the carnage. They swim the body back to the surface, Siri bringing up the rear. The creature is watching her from the distance. Later that night, the heavy rain begins to pour. Siri and Abel console each other over the death of Jean-Claude. The other team members review the footage again from Jean-Claude to see if they missed anything. Adolfo takes off on a boat in hopes to find any Brazilian authorities to take care of Pete. He says that he'll be gone for about 2 to 3 days. As Adolfo speeds down the river, he's shot in the head by Pete, who is waiting for him on a small lifeboat. In the middle of the night, Siri wakes, unable to sleep, and heads to the lounge to watch the footage Jean-Claude shot before the incident. She pauses the footage, notices something, and immediately runs to Mary's cabin. Siri interrupts Mary and Jake, who were having sex, and Siri asks for Mary's help. Siri and Mary go into the darkroom and grab the 35mm film camera. Siri goes into the lounge and takes a photo of the paused footage, making sure to focus on the background area and adjusts the settings to make the exposure brighter. She then takes multiple pictures of what she had got. She develops the photo in the darkroom, takes another photo of that photo, makes that brighter. She repeats this process multiple times, and in the final image, we see a blurry photo of an outline of what could be a fish, but in the shape of a human.
Is that a thing you can do? Keep taking photos of photos and to make it brighter?
No. As someone who has worked with film before, you can't really do that.
Yeah, that would just like make it poorer and poorer quality every single time.
Yeah. No, this is the equivalent of
zoom enhance.
Zoom in, enhance. Yeah. But the idea is there of like they missed it.
Yeah.
They can kind of see it. I think it'd be better if like you could pause the footage, because I'm guessing this is all going to videotape, and then you can like brighten the settings on the TV.
Yeah.
And then you could see it that way. I think that's a much more effective way to actually find that creature, because there is still some detail in the raw footage, but trying to get it out of like taking a photo of that photo, taking a photo of that photo, I don't think would work at all. But sure. They show the image to Hector, and he hypothesizes that this might be a shaman, a tribal medicine man, a man that takes the shape of a creature to defend the land from hunters and fishermen. The next day, Abel and Siri explore the crypt inside the temple. In the crypt, they notice hieroglyphics glorifying fishermen. The two explore even further and go down into the lower crypt. There, they find more altars with hieroglyphics that show the man-fish king. They examine the bones and find a hand bone with webbed fingers. They take some of the strange bones and swim it out of the crypt. But when they get to the door is blocked. They try to push the obstruction, but they're stuck. They look for another exit, but there's no luck. Above them, the creature is piling rocks on the exits. Siri and Abel are running out of air and now have to share Siri's regulator when Abel runs out entirely. The light from above scares the creature away, and then the rocks are cleared away from the passage, and there to lend a hand out of the crypt is Jake and Pete. Before they leave, Siri points to the man-fish skeleton, and Jake grabs it. At the surface, Siri and Abel embrace, happy to be alive. The team looks at the bones of the fishman. All of them are puzzled, while Pete feels vindicated. From beneath the water, the creature observes them. All the scientists are excited to study, while Pete states that this thing needs to be killed. The whole team just ignores Pete. Siri, Bobby, and Jake find and enter the round chamber of the temple. They all agree that they need to find this creature before Pete does. And then Bobby suddenly notices that Adolfo, he's been gone for quite a long time. We should probably be concerned about that. Do they address it later? They don't. Anyway, Siri feels around the wall and notices a secret door. They all push and get that door open.
Hold that door.
Yeah.
Sorry, just going. I think you should leave for a second.
Inside, they discover a gorgeous, undisturbed underground lake. They all jump into the lake as they unknowingly are being watched. The creature lowers into the water, hoping not to be discovered. He swims away underwater when the group unknowingly starts swimming towards him. The creature crawls up onto a small island and starts to transform and adapt to living on the land. Water pours from his pouches of his limbs, his skin changes color, he breathes air into his lungs, and his eyes rid themselves of fish lenses. He stands completely erect like a human and hides. Meanwhile, Abel, Hector, and Pete enter through the third pyramid. Pete is armed with a harpoon, and they meet the rest of the team at the underground lake. The plan is to spread out on the lake, periodically diving underwater until they find the creature. The creature hides on land and moves further away from them. They clear the lake and begin searching on land, leaving their scuba gear behind them. The creature is ducking and running away. Black ink leaks from his head, a natural defense mechanism that he can't control whenever he's scared. Bobby's light stops working. He checks the battery and turns it back on and reveals that the creature is right next to him. Bobby screams, and the creature claws Bobby's face in fear and dives back into the lake. Hector hurries to Bobby's side to help him, but the cuts are too deep, and Bobby dies from the wounds. Pete shoots a harpoon into the lake and misses the creature. The others are concerned about Bobby, but Pete doesn't care and dives into the lake, chasing the creature. The creature swims through a passageway and into the underground. Pete looks through the passageway and sees what he can describe as a shrine to these creatures. Many of their skeletons on funeral pyre-like structures, piled on top of one another, some of them towering to the ceiling of the cavern. Pete is aghast with what he's seen. The creature swims away to safety. The group regathers at the Black Lagoon. Hector finds a vine that, if ground up, the powder will knock out the creature, a remedy his village used for fishing. And with Mary's help, she can make a lot of this powder. Both Pete and Hector are lowered in on ropes above the underground lake and empty the powder into the water. They both wait with their harpoons ready. Jake and Abel ready themselves with harpoons at the underwater entrance of the underground lake. Almost immediately, paralyzed fish begin floating to the surface of the water. Hector explains that they only have about an hour until the substance wears off. Just then, the creature swims in front of Jake. Jake fires and hits the creature in the stomach. Abel takes a shot, but he misses. The creature swims away and into the lake with the harpoon still in him. Hector and Pete both shoot and hit the creature. The creature tries to remove the harpoons, but the paralyzing agent is too much for him, and he floats to the surface. Hector is about to capture him with a net, but Pete pulls out a knife to kill it, but Hector points a gun at Pete and thwarts his efforts. So he's not going to kill the creature at all. They capture the creature with the net and put him into a cage. The crew is in awe of the creature. The creature wakes up in a cage inside of a lab. The cage rests halfway in the water so he can submerge when necessary. He's not the only creature caged in the lab. There's also a jaguar, a howler monkey, a toucan, tapir, pirarucu, lungfish, manatee, and a giant turtle. Mary is continuing with her experiments as Abel and Siri enter the room. Siri pities the creatures. In the lab is a giant mirror that the creature catches himself in. He's fascinated, figuring out that through his movements, he's actually looking at himself. The creature notices that he's being watched and shyly backs into his cage, trying to hide himself. Abel and Siri notices that he has both lungs and gills. So basically, he's Kevin Costner. Abel and Siri seem to be getting closer romantically. The creature has been secreting black ink, first out of fear, but this time now out of jealousy and anger. The creature starts slamming his fists on the metal bars, damaging and weakening the cage. The others enter the lab when they hear the commotion. Hector dips the tip of the harpoon in the vine solution and shoots the creature, sedating him instantly. The team agrees that they need to leave as soon as possible. Siri informs a very drunk Pete that the team is going to be leaving. Pete resists, calling them all crazy, and says that they need to work this out through him. In the lab, the creature wakes up. Mary is still doing experiments and is too distracted to notice the creature using a nearby broom to knock a pack of her gum on the ground. She goes over to pick it up and gets too close to the creature, in which he slashes her neck. Blood is everywhere. He drags her body into the cage, crushing her skull in the process.
Yikes.
Yeah. Hector enters the lab and sees Mary's dead body. runs out of the lab, slams the door shut before the creature has a chance to attack him. The creature trashes the lab, causing a fire to break out. In a panic, he grabs the cage and throws it through a window, breaking it. The creature then begins throwing the mirror and the trapped animals through the broken window to rescue them. So he's really just a good guy.
Yeah.
Siri runs towards the fire with the fire extinguisher, but Hector turns her around. She narrowly dodges the escaping Jagfire by jumping into the lagoon. Hector equips himself with a tranquilizing harpoon, shoots at the creature, and misses. The creature jumps back into the lagoon right before Pete's eyes. Pete stumbles as he manages to toss grenades into the lagoon. The flames of the research vessel grow higher and higher. Siri and Abel try to extinguish as much of the fire as possible with little to no luck. Meanwhile, Hector and Jake fire up the helicopter. Yes, they have a helicopter. They offer Pete a ride, but Pete stays behind, stating that he needs to settle a debt, but he gets on anyways. Siri and Abel give up in their battle against the fire. They embrace and kiss each other. Suddenly, the creature bursts into the room, pushes Abel aside, and grabs Siri and carries her away. Abel struggles to get up. The creature dives into the temple with Siri, narrowly missing being shot by a rifle. Pete is actually shooting at the creature from the hovering helicopter. Siri is taken into the underground lake where she is finally given a chance to breathe. The men land the chopper. Pete, Hector, Abel, and Jake quickly strap on scuba gear and arm themselves and swim into the underground lake. The scene is dark, and the men can only see what their flashlights illuminate. They inflate a raft, and Pete and Hector position themselves in a portable boat. The creature holds Siri underwater. He leans into her, like they're going to kiss, but he actually breathes bubbles into her mouth so that she can continue to breathe underwater. The two dive down even further. The men pedal towards the grotto part of the lake. Light from the sun pierces through the cracks up above. The creature and Siri swim towards the surface, twirling around each other like a dance. They make it to the surface and onto the land. The creature transforms to adapt to the air. He carries Siri into the grotto. On the other end of the grotto, the men split at the fork of the path against Pete's suggestion. Jake with Pete and Abel with Hector. Near the waterfall, Jake sees Siri, dazed in tattered clothes, laying on the rocks. Pete tries to warn Jake, but he runs to Siri anyways and is stopped by the creature. Jake raises his harpoon gun and shoots the creature directly in the side. The creature roars in pain and chases Jake. Jake manages to get one more shot off before getting his head sliced off by the creature.
Yikes.
Yeah. The creature runs back, picks up Siri, and takes her further into the grotto. Both Hector and Abel hear Jake's short-lived scream, and they follow the noise. Hector and Abel split when they find the path forks. Hector discovers Jake's headless body and vomits at the sight. While Hector mourns, the creature claws Hector's back, crushing his spine. Hector tries to shoot with his pistol and misses. The creature finishes the job by crushing Hector's skull. Abel meets up with Pete. They walk into the grotto, passing by Jake and Hector's dead bodies. The water is getting deeper the further that they go in, and the path splits again, and instead of learning from their mistakes, they end up splitting up the team again, and this time we follow Pete. Now Pete spots the creature about 30 yards in front of him. Mm-hmm. The creature is removing the harpoons from his body, while Pete gleefully aims his rifle at him. After 5 years, Pete can finally fulfill his revenge. Pete misses his target because he was actually aiming at a mirror and not the actual creature. The creature was right next to him and proceeds to grab his head and crushes it like a melon. Pete's body is thrown into the water, which quickly turns red. All that's left is Abel, armed with a harpoon, pistol, and a knife. He spots Siri, who is being entwined by a 45-foot anaconda. He shoots a harpoon at the snake, empties his pistol, and proceeds to stab the snake. The creature walks in on the dire situation. The snake doesn't want to let go and proceeds to squeeze Siri even tighter. He pushes Abel out of the way, causing him to hit his head on the rock and knocking him out. The creature rips into the large snake. Siri is free with pieces of tattered snake scattered around her. She looks at the heroic creature and sees the harpoon still in his stomach. She pulls it out of him as if she was saving him. They both stare into each other's eyes. The creature gets up slowly and sinks into the water, knowing that the two of them don't belong together. Siri goes to Abel and performs CPR until he comes back to life. They kiss with great relief that they're alive, and the creature watches them as they walk away. And that is the end of John Carpenter's The Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I do find it really interesting that this is going down the love story angle and this whole like love between a human woman and the creature, which, forgive me if I'm misremembering, but that's not really something that's present at all in the original.
In the original, there was the moment where Kay is swimming through the water and the creature seems to be like following her and in some way like lovingly wants to be around her.
Yeah.
But has no intentions of killing her.
Yeah.
But like in the last resorts of him trying to stay alive, he's like, I guess you're my hostage now, and I'm just going to take you with me. I don't want to hurt you, but...
Yeah. There's the iconic poster image of the creature holding the female lead. But I just think it's interesting how that kernel of an idea grows with every iteration of the story, because as I'm sure you're about to get into, you know, this is not the last movie that has been made with the creature from the Black Lagoon, and it goes even more into the love story.
Yeah, it definitely pushes harder into it. They went as on the nose as they could with the original film, and yet... also made it subtle at the same time.
Sure.
But you could still tell that the creature was there to more so just defend his territory and that he was infatuated with Kay and just had never seen anyone like her. And it was like, yes, this is who I want, is her.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, this is the draft that Bill Phillips submitted back in May of 1992. Phillips has said in an interview with UniversalMonstersUniverse.com that there was a draft John Carpenter wrote after his draft that was pretty much the same story, but Carpenter included a lot more scary moments. The character Siri was actually named after his assistant from when he directed the movie There Goes the Neighborhood. The character Abel was actually named after the director Abel Ferrara, who was one of his favorite directors. He directed King of New York and Bad Lieutenant, the one with Harvey Keitel, not the one with Nicolas Cage. So let's get into why did this not get made?
Yeah.
Around the time of development, Carpenter had just released a film based on another Universal creature, Memoirs of an Invisible Man.
Where have you been? Everybody's looking for you.
I'm here. Sort of.
Now, this film was not produced by Universal and instead distributed by Warner Brothers. Turns out Universal doesn't have a copyright on invisible people.
If you can't see it, you can't copyright it.
Exactly. Actually, this is a side story. It was my old roommate. We were at a comic book store the other day, and she showed me this action figure for the Invisible Man, but it had a cover on it, and I was like, I really hope that there's just nothing in there. And she opened it up to reveal like the costume of the original one. She's like, yeah, I was hoping for that too, but... So Carpenter was pretty much set up for failure when he took on the film. The script was first attached to Chevy Chase to star in the film.
Okay.
When that happened, this pretty much turned into his vanity project, and he took this project and made it produced by his production company. Do you know what the name of his production company is?
I do not.
It is quite pretentious. It is called Cornelius Productions.
This is Chevy Chase's production company?
This is Chevy Chase's production company, yeah.
Now I'm curious if that's where the name Cornelius Hawthorne comes from, which is, of course, the name of Pierce's dad in Community.
It has to be.
It has to be a reference, 100%.
Yeah, like it's Dan Harmon subtly making fun of Chevy Chase.
Yes.
After the script was purchased and greenlit, Chevy was not happy with the script and forced multiple rewrites and caused director Ivan Reitman and writer William Goldman to leave the production. Goldman was actually not paid for his writing, and he had to file a lawsuit in order to get some money from Warner Brothers.
Wait, okay, slow down. When did Ivan Reitman show up on this story again? I apologize if I missed that.
No, you didn't. So this was the first director signed on to the project was Ivan Reitman.
Before it was John Carpenter?
Before it was John Carpenter.
Okay. Because this is sounding like Chevy Chase, Ivan Reitman, this is going to be a comedy.
Yes, that's kind of what they were going for. So he left the project. 2 new writers were hired. It was Dana Olson and Robert Collector. When they were hired, they then attached another director to it. This was Richard Donner to make this movie because he had recently worked with visual effects on the Superman movie. So they figured that he would be a good fit for the Invisible Man. But he turned down the offer, probably read the script and was like, this is garbage. Now, it's not known who, but someone suggested that John Carpenter should direct, and Chevy Chase pretty much forced him into the position. And after 18 months, Carpenter worked on the script and did his best that he could with Chevy Chase's demands. Now, Chevy Chase, at the time, he wanted to change his image from being typecast as Clark Griswold and wanted to be looked at as more of a serious actor. And he figured that this movie would be his chance to show the world that he is a serious actor.
Sure, guy.
Yep. The film was a flop. It was number 2 on its opening weekend, trailing far behind Wayne's World, which actually opened the weekend before. Now, this movie had a budget of nearly $40 million and only made $14 million in the box office. In a 2023 Variety article, Carpenter stated this about his experience on working on Memoirs, quote, "It gave me a chance to make a quasi-serious movie, but Chevy Chase, Sam Neill, who I love and had a long-time relationship with, and Warner Brothers, I worked for them, and it was pleasant." No, it wasn't pleasant at all. I'm lying to you. It was a horror show. I really want to quit the business after that movie.
Wow.
God, I don't want to talk about why. But let's say that there were personalities on that film. He shall not be named who needs to be killed. No. That's terrible. He needs to be set on fire. No. Anyways, it's all fine. I survived.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
It's pretty obvious that he's talking about Chevy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Huh. Somebody had a bad experience working with Chevy Chase on a movie?
Yep.
Interesting.
And then he stated while working with him, he was impossible to direct and that he would oftentimes refuse to wear his special effects makeup and remove it prematurely, ruining the day's worth of filming. Yeah. It is suspected that the commercial failure of Memoirs of an Invisible Man played a part into why Universal executives did not greenlight the Creature production. Another suspicion is that Universal, having just released Jurassic Park, the idea of a small lizard movie coming out after a big lizard movie was probably something that wouldn't motivate the people to go to the theaters. Now, according to Sandy Carpenter, which is John Carpenter's wife and producer, Universal never said no to the project, but they did stop responding and never gave them that green light. The attempts to make a new Gil-Man movie doesn't stop with John Carpenter. There have been multiple filmmakers that have taken a swing at the creature. Around 1995, the duo Herschel Wingrod and Timothy Harris, they were the ones who wrote Trading Places, Brewster's Millions, Twins, My Stepmother is an Alien, Kindergarten Cop, and Space Jam. They wrote a draft that was potentially going to be directed by Ivan Reitman and Peter Jackson. Now, Jackson, he actually turned down the gig to make another monster remake, King Kong.
Yeah.
In 2001, after the success of The Mummy in 1999, Gary Ross and his father, Arthur Ross, were developing a reboot of The Creature for nearly a decade. Arthur Ross was one of the original writers of The Creature from the Black Lagoon. The reboot was one of the last scripts that he ever wrote before passing away in 2008. Director Breck Eisner, who directed Sahara, The Crazies, and is the son of Michael Eisner, was going to direct, but wanted to make a few changes to the script, including a plot that included pharmaceutical companies spilling dangerous chemicals into the Amazon.
Interesting. That sounds like the start of The Host, the Bong Joon-ho movie.
Oh, yeah. So the plan was to shoot on location in Manaus, Brazil. The Gil-Man was going to be a combination of practical and CGI with a suit designed by Mark Crash McCreary. He worked previously on Batman Returns, Small Soldiers, Galaxy Quest, Pirates of the Caribbean, Van Helsing, and Lady in the Water. Now, Gary Ross was assigned as a producer for the film, and after Eisner's CGI suggestion, Ross insisted that the creature be 100% practical. Another potential director for the script was Carl Erik Rintz, who did The Gift in 2010 and also directed 47 Ronin. The film was delayed during the 2008 writer's strike and never got picked up after that. Now, to no surprise, Guillermo del Toro was interested in making his version of the creature. When Guillermo was a kid, he always imagined Gil-Man getting together with Kay, as the film should have ended that way. Years later, in 2011, Del Toro collaborated with the Troll Hunters author Daniel Cross to write a version of the creature where he ends up with his love interest. Del Toro pitched the film to Universal and was immediately rejected. So Guillermo took his idea and pitched to Fox instead, and The Shape of Water won Best Picture and Best Director.
Yep. Which is really weird in hindsight. Like, I just want to go back to the people who made the original Creature from the Black Lagoon and just be like, hey, by the way, somebody's going to turn this into a love story and it's going to get Best Picture.
I don't see that happening in my lifetime.
Yep.
It is weird that it's a sci-fi movie that won Best Picture. That never happens.
Not only that, but it's like a twist on a monster movie that's turned into a love story. It's really bizarre when you kind of break it down to its most basic descriptions.
Yeah, that's true. Speaking of bizarre things, the Gil-Man did briefly come back to life in 2009 after the Universal Studios theme park shut down their Fear Factor live show. To replace the show was The Creature from the Black Lagoon, the musical, which debuted July 1st, 2009.
What?
There to attend the first show was Julie Adams, the actress who portrayed Kay Lawrence in the original film. The show operated until September 2009 and was replaced temporarily with Bill and Ted's Excellent Halloween Adventure for Halloween Horror Nights. Unfortunately, a fire occurred during one of the performances, shutting down the theater until it was repaired. After that, the musical never returned, and today the theater is used for their special effects stage show. The musical is loosely based on the original film, but it's Universal Studios, so the show was introduced by a clip from the Today Show with Matt Lauer and Meredith Vieira.
Just a scary work of fiction, right? Well, maybe not. Now, a new team of brave, brilliant, and surprisingly attractive young scientists headed back to the Black Lagoon to, as they say right here in their press release, probe the deepest, darkest bowels of Mother Nature.
That sounds very painful.
You know, it does. The expedition is led by Mark Buffett, son of the billionaire scientist Graham Buffett, and included on this team of brainiacs, one fine lady ichthyologist. You know, you'd think they'd put some pictures of her in here.
Come on. Jeez. The team will investigate the mysterious recent deaths of many locals and try to explain sightings of a strange and perhaps prehistoric creature.
The audience sees the characters Kay, Mark, and David traveling down the Amazon on the Rita, just like the film, but unlike the movie, the boat is captained by an Amazonian woman. The show includes the songs Black Lagoon, Slay Me, Prime Evil, and Strange New Hunger. The story takes a wild left turn, and they reveal the creature's name is Gil. Gil falls into a supply of human growth hormones and grows to be 25 feet tall and eats Kay.
Perfect.
They encore with the song Black Lagoon, and the show ends.
True love is sure to thrill in the Black Lagoon. True love is sure to kill in the Black Lagoon. So if you're planning to survive, don't enter the black or you'll never come back alive. Oh, the Black
I wish I would have seen this show. Actually, it's probably somewhere online. I could probably look it up.
Yeah.
So, another honorable mention is James Gunn. During an Instagram Q&A, he revealed that after 2004's Dawn of the Dead, he was approached by Universal to write a potential reboot of Creature, but the production never moved forward. In 2012, Universal announced that they hired David Kajanich to write the reboot, The Black Lagoon. Nothing came of the script, but Kajanich explained his side of what happened to UniversalMonstersUniverse.com. Quote, "It may seem hard to believe, but I have no idea if any of the script is being used or not. That's the surreal part of writing for a studio. They own what you've written and can do with it whatever they choose, with no obligation to keep you informed. I did 2 drafts a number of years ago, so I imagine they've started over since my draft did not in any way connect to the mythology of the Black Lagoon to the rest of the monsters in the universe stable. The concept came after my involvement. It's definitely the most commercial script I've done, but it's a shitload of fun to research and write. It was a ride through the kind of 70s style id-based horror I grew up loving. This brings us to Universal's attempt to create the Dark Universe.
Wait, I forgot to check. Is the tweet still up? Do you know about this whole thing?
No.
Yes, there it is. Universal Marketing was quick to get their Twitter profile set up. Joined May 2017 for @DarkUniverse. And it's just got the cast photo of who was going to be and witness the beginning of a dark universe. And that's it.
Oh.
That's all that's here. Because it never happened. Who's on this cast list? We got Russell Crowe, who is being Jekyll Mr. Hyde, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's Javier Bardem. I don't know what Javier Bardem was doing. There's Tom Cruise, which had something to do with The Mummy. Johnny Depp. I don't remember what he's doing here. And an actress who I don't recognize.
Well, she was in The Mummy.
Oh, okay.
She was the Mummy.
Oh, she was the Mummy.
Yeah, that is interesting.
It's just funny how this is just like a weird relic that's just still exists on Twitter.
That's great. So yeah, the 2017 The Mummy attempted to set up the multiple reboots that could have all connected together, including Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, Dracula, Phantom of the Opera, Hunchback of Notre Dame, Invisible Man, and of course, Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Mm-hmm.
In the film, there are a few Easter eggs that show a dismembered arm and a hand implying that he was captured by the Prodigium. Because of the film's bad reviews and poor box office performance, any plans to continue the Dark Universe were abruptly canceled.
Mm-hmm.
So there is another potential for a Creature reboot.
Wait, is this all you had for the Dark Universe?
That was it for the Dark Universe.
Okay, because there is one thing, because I did remember hearing rumors of who was cast to play the Creature from the Black Lagoon. Did you hear about this?
I didn't know about the Creature. There is one, casting, I'll tell you this right now, Chris Evans and Scarlett Johansson. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, what I heard was that Scarlett Johansson was cast as the Creature. Maybe that was people mixing things up.
Yeah, I believe so. Okay, so here's what I found out. Chris Evans, Scarlett Johansson, they were rumored to be cast in the lead roles as Kay Lawrence and Dr. David Reed.
Gotcha.
As far as the Creature goes, we don't actually know.
Okay.
It's probably going to be Doug Jones. Now, this cast was rumored around 2015. I guess the Dark Universe was kind of being formed at that time, but no one really knows entirely.
Yeah.
But after the release of The Invisible Man in 2020 by Blumhouse, Universal then realized that you don't necessarily need to make a Dark Universe all connected together.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Marvel's doing its own thing.
Yeah.
They're connecting everything together. Great. But with The Invisible Man, that proved to Universal that, hey, you can make just a singular story with this creature, with this monster.
Yeah.
And because of that movie, rumors have been risen to the surface again that's saying hey, Scarlett Johansson, Chris Evans, they can still make this movie. They can still make a singular contained creature movie.
I remembered one thing. I think one of the reasons that it got mixed around when I remember hearing announcements about it of, Scarlett Johansson playing the Creature is because those announcements would have been coming out around the same time as that movie Under the Skin came out.
Oh, right.
Where Scarlett Johansson is playing a weird alien monster thing,
yep.
sort of. I think that's probably where things got mixed around and people were like, oh, what if we make Scarlett Johansson the terrifying monster?
Yeah. With the Creature, Universal's still gunning to make it. Right now, as far as the studios are going, nothing's being made right now. So unless A24, if you want to take on a Creature movie, by all means, I would love to see that.
Yeah.
But as far as Universal goes, I don't think we're going to see anything from them anytime soon.
I personally don't feel like there's much of a need for a Creature for the Black Lagoon movie for a while because The Shape of Water is already a really good definitive take on the story, like in the same way that like The Invisible Man is definitely much more straight horror, but it is like, okay, we're gonna do a specific take on this movie, and I feel like we don't need another specific take on Creature from the Black Lagoon right now, but maybe
it would be interesting to see what they do if you rebooted both Kay and Dr. Reed in those positions. I think you can make an interesting story out of it, but yes, with The Shape of Water, with how great that movie was, it feels like that was the fresh idea that we needed. That was the fresh reboot that we truly craved, and it was a great one-off movie, self-contained movie, and that's really what we needed. So as far as the reboot goes, even though Universal didn't make it, it kind of did get made anyways.
Yeah, absolutely.
But as far as John Carpenter's Creature from the Black Lagoon, would you like to see it?
I don't know. There is some interesting stuff in there, but I don't think it would be something that I would like use a time machine on. Let's put it that way. It's like, yeah, that'd be cool, but it's not something that I would feel the burning need to make happen. I don't know. How do you feel about it?
I don't know if I'd want to see this movie specifically, but the part that really got me was the fact that there was a ancient temple underwater in which this creature came from, and comes from a lineage of other Gil-Man creatures, fish creatures that have, in a way, protected the Amazon.
Yeah, I mean, all of that almost makes me think of the version of Namor we see in Black Panther 2.
Yeah.
It almost kind of has that similar, it's a South American temple and everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that idea of like, there's this underwater tribe that has been there for centuries, that have protecting the Amazon, have their own established religion, have their own temples. I think that idea you can really run with and make something great out of it.
Absolutely.
So if anything, I don't want to see this movie particularly, but you can pull that element out, and then you could run with that with the new Creature reboot, and it would still be fresh, and it would still be different enough from Guillermo del Toro's The Shape of Water to make a really interesting creature movie.
For sure.
Yeah, that's it. That's John Carpenter's Creature from the Black Lagoon.
All right. Well, I guess that's going to go ahead and wrap up this episode. So thank you, everybody, so much for listening. If you want to find more episodes of this podcast, you can go check out our website, pipedreampodcasts.com, which is also the home of Pod Made You Special, Come On Fahugo Pods, Escape from Walt Disney, and more. While you're there, you can also find a link to our Patreon page if you'd like to support us and get ad-free versions of this podcast and lots of other fun stuff. So thank you, everybody, for listening. And those social media pages are just excellent follows in general. We are on Instagram at How Did This Not Get Made. We're on Twitter or X or whatever it decides to call itself at HDTNGM. And you can also send us your emails, notgetmade@gmail.com. That's going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you, everybody, so much for listening.
Thank you.
We're on a desperate hunt for
riches,
romance,
to escape, to survive.
But once you've gone black, you will